Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. Today I'm going to have a go at something I've never done before. I've seen enough videos of it. In fact, there's one up today. Jason's done one, Jason Hanrahan. But I'm going to have a go at an air layer. When I got this juniper, it was a dual purpose purchase. It's got some good movement to the trunk here. And it's got lots of branches to choose from, some of which can be gins, but the extensions were left on. This came from Greenwood Bonsai from Corinne, and he said that, you know, the new lot in, some of them deliberately had the long branches left on in case people wanted to do an air layer, or 2 or 3 or whatever. Now I haven't decided how many yet. But the first thing to do before blurting in and air layering a branch out of the choices I've got, I'm only going to do one today, I may do more, is to decide what branches I actually want to keep on the tree before we start air layering everything in sight. So I'm going to sort of turn this, let's get the rocks off, that's to stop it blowing over in the wind outside. Let's turn it on its side and see what we've got here. So we've got a little low branch there that I probably wouldn't keep anyway. But I'm not designing the tree now, I'm looking at the possibilities. This is logically the first branch. It's on an outside bend. It's about in the right position. This one, however, could be kept because it could be classed as at the back, depending on what angle this trunk ends up at. It's a very long branch. That's this one we were just looking at. And there's 2 that come out in the same place. Well, they wouldn't both be kept. And the second one that goes off to the right there actually splits in 2. So those 2 branches is this bit here. This bit here is this long extension. And that, as I said, depending on the angle the trunk ends up at, that could end up being a back branch or a branch that comes off to the right. It is effectively on an outside bend. But again, it's okay. Branches on the inside of the bend are not going to be kept. So this one here is in a bad place. So that one definitely will be air layered. It's a reasonable length. But that's not all. So if we're keeping that one, we're getting rid of this one. There's another really long one here, which would probably make a good layer. It's still just about bendable, although it is pretty thick. But near the apex of the tree, with a bit of shape to it, it would probably make quite a good gin. But somewhere along the line it needs to be an apex. Now this is the natural apex. There's been a branch taken off here, so this and here, so it's had some chops done here with the intention of this making the apex, this being the apex. If this branch comes off, it's going to leave a very long section of trunk with no branches. The problem is it's too thick, but it would make, in that case, it would make a nice gin. So we'll leave that and make a gin out of it. We won't air layer that. Or if I'm going to make a gin out of it, I just will air layer it, hadn't I? Because I'm not going to have a gin that long. It's only going to be, you know, perhaps that much is the gin. I could air layer here. And as it's the first one I've ever done, working on the top of the tree might not be a bad idea rather than getting all tangled up with branches. So I think we'll do this one today. Yeah. Decision made. As I said, I haven't finalised which branches I'm keeping or anything. Right, I'll just shut down so that I can put the camera on the tripod. Right, I've brought the camera in really close, which means I will probably knock it now and again, and I will still probably get my hands in the way. But first thing to do is decide where the air layer is going to be, and I think it ought to be about here. That leaves enough there to deal with the gin in some shape and gives me a nice long whip. So first thing to do then is strip the branches off. So we'll snip those off. And out of the way. Actually, I'm going to have to put the rocks back on because this keeps wobbling all over the place. The trouble is, I think there's a lot of roots in this pot, and as a consequence, it's takes quite a lot to get it absolutely soaking wet. Right. Right, that'll do. We'll see what comes off. Now, one thing that I have got a thing about is knives. And I always think that a knife with a handle that fits your hand is less likely to slip. This is a one-piece knife. And the other thing it needs to be is sharp. I'm not going to test it on my thumb, otherwise we'll get blood everywhere. But it has just been sharpened on a stone, so it should do the job. Now again, as I said, my hand's probably going to be in the way, but the first job is to cut a ring. And I always think that if you're going to cut a ring, start on the bit you can't see and work round. Oops. Work round. Now I've got to go back and find where that cut is. There. Make sure your other hand is well out of the way. This cut will be the top of the air layer section of the bark that's got to be removed. This is the bit that needs a clean cut, and if it's not clean, it'll get cleaned up in a minute. Right, so now this bit doesn't matter so much. Fingers and hands out the way. It's very easy to slip. And if you just sharpened your knife, it'll do the job nicely. And then you'll have to leave your air layer halfway through while you go and patch up the mess you're making. And then again, if you're going to take the bark off, cut away from you. Don't cut towards you. Always cut away. As I said, the bottom bit doesn't matter too much. It's this top bit that matters, that it comes off clean. Can't see what I'm doing here. Just going to have to turn this round just so that I can see this back bit. There we go. That's got it. You have to make sure every bit of bark is off. Then you have to make sure that the layer underneath is scraped clean. Otherwise it can form a bridge, and you'll find that the tree will callus over and the air layer just won't take. Because if it manages to callus over and form a bridge, then it doesn't need the roots, so it won't grow them. Well, I think we're okay. Again, I just need to get underneath to make sure I've got this. Yeah. Right. Next job, clean that cut. So just go round again. Make sure it's clean. No fuzzy edges. It's worth it. You know, that's the edge of that you're going to be working with. So, just say, make sure it's clean. That should do. Right. Now I've just got a a freezer bag, a food bag. Quite honestly, what you use doesn't matter, and it doesn't have to be clear plastic. But if it's not clear plastic, you'll have to keep taking it off to see if you've got any roots yet. You see what I mean? So if you use clear plastic, you can see what's going on. Now, first thing I'm going to do is cut the top off of this because it's going to get in the way. It's very stiff because that's its purpose. It's a freezer bag, and that's the bit you seal your food in with. But no good for sealing this in with. And I'm just going to cut down to the base, and then I'm going to cut in a bit. So we've basically got a wrap, if you see what I mean. Right, so that's for in a minute, but now we're going to want some moss. Now I'm using this is my bonsai moss, and I don't know how much I'm going to need. It needs to be quite tightly packed, but not so tight that there's no air in there at all. Now I'm using this rather than any other sort of sphagnum moss because I know this is sterile and it will do the job. As I said, the orchid roots love it, so just leave this. Should have put that in to soak a little bit earlier, but this type of moss, this is absolutely bone dry, you know, dust dry. But because of the type of moss it soaks up an enormous amount of water very, very quickly. And it's now sucked up so much water that before I put it in the bag, I will have to squeeze it and get rid of it, because otherwise it'll just be a flood. Right, so now is the fiddly bit, some people say. I don't really see why it's called a fiddly bit. Quite honestly, I've got too much bag here. Let's cut some off. There's just too much here. I don't need all this. It's only going to, you know, get in the way. So let's have a smaller piece here. So what we've got to do is get this into a bag round the trunk at the base. That's down onto the bark, so that the moss can be put inside. Yeah, so that looks okay. I'll be able to get my moss in there. Right, so the next thing to do is put a bit of wire around there, hold it in place. I'll be back. There's always one thing you forget, isn't there? Wire cutters. Actually, I could probably cut that wire with the pliers, come to think of it. Yeah, jolly good. Right, so again, we just get this into a place where the wire will seal it. This is going to go on and stay there. This is not to be taken off until the whole thing comes off. So this needs to be a nice tight seal. And there's no need for knots, no need for messing around. You can just wrap it around, not under any pressure. Just make sure it's relatively airtight, otherwise effectively the moisture will leak out. Right, so now you've got to do the moss bit. Now this is relatively important. See, total novice. What was the point of buying that if you're not going to use it? Duh. Now I don't know what this is like. I did buy a gel simply because, I'm just going to give that a shake. I bought a gel on the grounds that, relatively speaking, it will be easier to apply than a powder. That was my theory. I don't know whether that's true or not. So I'm just putting some of this hormone rooting gel round the cut. A little bit onto the bark and a little bit onto the bit there. But the most important place for this is the cut. It's the join, because that's where the roots are going to come out. Right, lid back on so we don't knock it over. Nearly forgot that. That would have been a disaster. Right, moss. I'm going to give it a squeeze, as I said, because it's very wet, and that will leave it damp. Make sure there's plenty. If you think about it, this needs to be full of roots, not just a couple. It needs to be left on until this bag is full of roots. They tend to head away from the cut towards the edge of the bag. So by having a nice thick layer, it takes them quite a while to get to the edge of the bag, and you're not tempted to take it off too soon. Make sure it goes up above your cut and is nice and firm, but not, you know, not overly tight. A little branch in the way there. Right, and then just gather your polythene together. This is the bit where it will need to overlap to make it airtight. Like that. And round here, like that. Yeah, that looks quite good. I'm happy with that. Another bit of wire. Just wrap that round there. Again, it's, you know, no knots, no messing about. Just you're trying to make an airtight seal, basically. Now, what some people do is that they use a little syringe to actually inject water in to save undoing it all. Well, it's not a big deal to undo it all if you have to. Right, now the only thing I'm going to do now is I'll need another little bit of wire, and then I've got a last thing that I want to do before it goes back outside. So again, I'll break off, I'll be back. I just went to get another length of wire because I just want to wrap some wire around here to make sure that is held firmly. It doesn't need to be like tight binding or anything, it's just to hold it in place, really, nothing more. And also go over the join, you know, so just to hold it in place and make sure that that join is okay. One more. We'll come round to the bottom. Right, that looks nice and neat and nice and even. Not that the look is important. And we've got a nice amount of moss all round. So I think that should do the job quite nicely. Now the foil, this isn't absolutely necessary, but what I'm doing this for, shiny side out, is so that this tree can go back in the sun. If that gets in the sun, that's going to almost boil. But by having the foil round it, it'll give it some protection from the sun and stop it getting too hot. Because it will obviously reflect the sun away, being shiny and all that. So that's just a precaution to stop the actual moss getting too hot. That's all that's for. And that holds itself in place and shouldn't need any wire or anything just to clip that on. So there we go, that's my first ever air layer. Being a juniper of the Chinese variety, they are supposed to air layer quickly. Now I don't know, I've never done one, but I've been told 8 to 12 weeks and you should have a good root system by then, if done relatively early in the year. So that's what I've done. Now that's one. I will put that back now, because if I attempt to do another one now, I'll get flustered, you know, one at a time. But I may do another one off of this tree in the not too distant future. But as far as the video goes, that's my first attempt at an air layer. And, well, I think this is the point where you wish me luck. All those that are doing air layers all the time think, oh, it's not a problem, it's easy, I've done loads. But I've also seen people that have done loads that have miserable failures, so they don't always work. And I would like this to work. The problem is, if it doesn't work, you've taken the bark off there, that's really, that branch is messed up now because it won't grow back, you know. Right, so that's that then. I've got some trident maples that I might look into taking an air layer on, but I've got nothing else in mind as far as air layers are concerned. This was bought with air layers in mind, so it was like a purpose bought tree to do some air layers. And my trident maples are long, skinny, almost dead straight trunks, and I've got 3 of them. 2 are supposed to be fusing together to form a twin trunk, but they're still too long. They're never going to thicken up suitable for a tree that long, so they need to be cut, and to be cut would be a bit of a waste, wouldn't it? Trident maples are not so easy to come by as they used to be, so we may be doing an air layer or 2 on the trident. Anyway, thanks for dropping by, and if you're not subscribed, it would be nice if you did so. Don't forget the old thumbs up, it all helps, and I'll see you next time.